Comment, like, subscribe. The bell keeps you notified. It helps the show thrive. All 26 letters of the English alphabet do indeed serve a purpose, from the ever-present E to the conflicting C and K to the solemnly used Z. While all the letters of the alphabet are important, some are more important than others, as Orwell would probably phrase it. The question of what is the best letter in the alphabet doesn't seem to be one that discussed, probably because very few people are as dumb as myself and haven't taken the time to actually think about it. From googling that question, a couple interesting results came up. PasteMagazine.com, whoever they are, have an article ranking the letters from lamest to coolest, with B being dubbed the lamest and Z being dubbed the coolest, each to their own I suppose. A more interesting article on the matter comes from the New York Times and declares X as the best letter of the alphabet, based on how we've used it in all manners of ways throughout history, from its use in religion to its use in anonymity. While that is a really interesting school of thought unto itself, I don't personally think that X is the best letter in the alphabet, especially when looking at this question from a more language and linguistics perspective. So what letter do I think takes this honour? And please bear in mind that this is just my own silly opinion. Well, it isn't X or Z or even the ever popular E or any of its vowel brethren. I instead think that the best letter in the English alphabet is none other than the letter S. That might sound a tad strange at first, but hear me out. S is a supremely interesting letter. I highlighted this fact in a recent video, which in turn led to the creation of this video, and S's interestingness really starts with its history. Like the majority of letters in the English alphabet, S started with the Phoenicians before being adapted by the Greeks, then adapted by the Romans, and then adapted by us. The earliest form of this letter that the Phoenicians gave us was called Shin, and it looked very similar to our modern W. It was based on teeth, which you can actually really see. It had never clicked to me that W looked like a pair of teeth, but here we are. When the Greeks got their hands on this letter, however, they actually flipped it onto its side and gave it the new name of Sigma. Then from the Greeks to the Romans, Sigma got adapted into Latin as the letter S. Though of course language keeps on changing, and in Old English the letter of S for a time actually split into two different letters. If you ever look at Old English documents, you may notice that in some words where we might expect to find an S, you'll instead find a letter that looks somewhat like a lowercase f that lacks the dash through the middle of it. This character was called a long S, which is really funny because it actually does just look like an S that has been stretched out. The long S character was cemented into the language by around the 15th century and was used to represent the S sound at the start or middle of words. The S we know today, which was created in Latin, was still in use however, at first solely as the capitalized form of the letter, but then it got dubbed a short/round S and was being used in words when the S sound appeared at the end of the word, or when an S sound appeared in the middle of a word but after a long S sound. Just a tad confusing to say the least. Thankfully, things got a little bit less confusing by the 18th century, as in English, the long S character was only being used in place of a double S in words. Though as printing became more common across the globe, the long S character was dropped altogether. This was because printing presses only had a set amount of letters to work with, so it was easier to have just one character for the letter S, and the one that won out was the short/round S, aka the S we all know today. Maybe one day the long S will make an ironic comeback or something. But speaking of the S we know and love today, let me explain why I personally think that S is the best letter of our alphabet. S isn't the most popular letter in our alphabet in regards to frequency of use. That title belongs to E, as I hinted towards, but it's the 7th most popular letter overall and the 3rd most popular consonant. And yes, if you love a top 10 list as much as I do, then I'm happy to reveal that the top 10 most popular letters from 10th to 1st place are D, R, H, S, O, N, I, A, T, and then E. This information comes from none other than one Samuel Morse. Prior to inventing the code he named after himself, he wanted to know what the most commonly used letters were, so he could make their codes easier to message. While this information is still important, it is not entirely accurate, with other sources claiming S is around the 8th most popular letter. It is still in the top 10 however. S does however take the top spot in a different, very impressive field. S is the most commonly seen letter at the start of words, meaning there are more words starting starting with the letter S than any other letter in the English language, which is incredibly impressive. S's popularity can be found all over the place. A great place to see the abundance of words starting with S is with country names. More country names start with the letter S than any other letter in English. This includes the likes of Spain, Sweden, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Serbia, Senegal, Samoa, St. Lucia, Slovakia, and Slovenia, to name just a few. Do not underestimate just how frequently the letter S pops up at the start of words. And while it is superbly splendid just how often S starts a word, what I personally find more amazing about the letter S is when it is seen at the end of a word. S does appear naturally at the end of some words, take grass or iris an example. However, we often add an S to the end of a word, regardless if there's one there normally or not. E.g., the word car can become cars, apple becomes apples, and sometimes we even add an ES if a word already ends with an S, like compass becoming compasses. This addition of an S of course represents pluralization, meaning more than one. E.g., cars represents the fact we're talking about more than one car. While there are other ways to make a word plural, such as wolf becoming wolves, child becoming children, and sheep saying a sheep, adding an S is by and far the most common way in which we change words into plurals. But why was it S, out of all the letters in the English alphabet, that got chosen to be the one to represent plurals? Well, I have no idea, and neither does anyone else it would seem. This video was initially meant to tackle that subject alone, but when I hit a dead end in that regard, I expanded it into this mess you are watching now. One of the leading theories is that was a Norse influence on the language, as Old English changed words into plurals in other ways, which still somewhat live on, as we saw with child into children, which was of Old English origins. But we also have ox into oxen, and while brother can still be pluralized into brethren, which is an Old English creation, brothers is now way more popular as its plural form. Another idea on why S became the go-to letter for plurals is due to the sound it makes. The S sound is more correctly called the voiceless alveolar sibilant, and throughout history it was this sound that just became linked with plurals of things. So when it came to writing words down with characters that represented sounds, that character of S made this voiceless alveolar sibilant sound people were already using when talking, so it got used in the written form of plurals too. Regardless of why it was an S that became the letter for plurals, it cannot be denied that pluralization gives S a hugely important function in the English language. But what's more impressive is that not only is this not the only function S has, it's not even the only time we add an S to the end of words that normally lack one. You may also see a word with an S on the end which normally lacks one, but with an apostrophe too, e.g. bird becomes birds, or Malcolm becomes Malcolms. This is another highly important function the letter S has, and it makes something possessive, meaning we are saying that something/someone belongs to something/someone else. E.g., with those two previous examples, we may say something like the bird's nest or Malcolm's sausage. Without the apostrophe, birds and Malcolms would simply mean that there is more than one bird or more than one Malcolm. Like with pluralization, we don't seem to know how exactly S came to be the letter used for possessives, though this gives the letter S two highly important roles in English: to highlight many plural forms of words and to signify possessives too. And as mentioned, when we pluralize a word ending with S, we more often than not add an ES instead of just an S. So what happens when it comes to making a word ending with S possessive? Well, while no E's come into play, one of two things can happen. By and large, the only words we make possessive are nouns, and different things happen depending on what kind of noun the noun ending with S is. If it's a generic noun which doesn't highlight anyone in particular and ends with an S, we normally still add an apostrophe and then S, e.g. the boss's shoes. But if the S ending noun is a proper noun, like James for example, we just add an apostrophe, e.g. James's boots. But in all honesty, this rule seems to be somewhat debated. Do what you want when it comes to possessives and words ending with S. No one will really be that bothered. And if they do get annoyed about it, tell them a random dude on the internet with no credibility whatsoever told you it was okay. That'll show them. Anyway, what I find so startling is that this same single letter, S, came to have two highly important functions: to help create plurals and possessives. When you take a step back, this probably didn't have to be the case at all. Language and the alphabet is a human-made construct. We could have just created a different character to represent plurals and possessives, but instead we gave all those functions to the letter S. But on top of these two huge functions, S has even more functions. Contractions in language are when we use an apostrophe to merge two words into one, e.g. they are becomes there. While contractions happen with all sorts of words and letters, S is often seen in contractions. This is because of how often we contract the words of is and has with other words, e.g. she is becomes she's, or he has becomes he's. It can even happen with proper names, like Jessica has eaten becomes Jessica's eaten. And for those wondering about contracting names that end with an S, well, it's a case of adding apostrophe S regardless. In example, James is tired becomes James is tired. When it comes to contracting is and has, the apostrophe S gets added regardless of what the word is like already. And it even has yet another use too, that being the ability to turn adjectives into nouns when once again added to the end of a word, e.g. acoustic becoming acoustics, and so on. If that sounds familiar, it's because it was this ability to turn adjectives into nouns that I mentioned in my math versus maths video that sent us all on this weird tangent. So the circle is complete, I suppose. Though one of the funnest uses S's has received in recent years is that it's become the letter linked with something being of the highest quality / rank. This comes from the advent of tier ranking lists becoming popular, and S tier more often than not being the top tier, even over A. S became the top tier letter through Japanese culture and video games, where it meant things like super, special, or star. If you're anything like myself, your first memory of S being the top rank will come from Sonic video games. While somewhat silly, this is still another use the letter has, and this use literally puts S as the most important letter. How can you argue with it? But between being the most popular letter for a start of a word, the third most popular consonant, and the seventh most popular overall letter, as well as having multiple grammatical functions such as being used to create plurals, possessives, contractions, and changing adjectives to nouns, I can't help but declare that S is the single best letter in the English alphabet. But that's just my own dumb opinion. If you don't agree with me, that's completely fine. Let me know what you think is the best letter in the entire alphabet down below. That would be super. This video topic was suggested by Laura Veronica Graniso over my Patreon. Every Wednesday, I put up a video request post over on my Patreon for my awesome patrons to leave video ideas on. I then pick one of those ideas to be turned into a video the following Wednesday. So if you have a great idea for a Name Explain video and wish to enjoy Name Explain videos ad-free as well as get exclusive content, then why not support the channel on Patreon? It takes just $1 a month to help the channel in a huge way and gets you all of these amazing benefits. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, and the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos. $2 a month gets you all that, plus your name here with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.